Let's go. So January just was the date that they gave me for the publication of my book, and I wrote it during lockdown. I didn't write it during lockdown. I began it ages before lockdown, and but I actually finished it when the unthinkable had happened, and there was like a global pandemic. So anyway, here we are. We have London, we have Virginia, we have Spain, we have Norway, we have people all over the world, and that's a really great benefit for me to be able to bring everybody together. When I was trying to decide what to do about this this book launch, I decided it would be a good idea to make a little film, and so that's what I've done. And I think that I'm just going to show that little film. I have lovely Jackie asking me questions, so I'm going to just share that film with you.
It's really, really lovely to be here, and I am genuinely excited. I've read most of your first book, and I'm now, because I've only just discovered you, and I have now, it's just lovely to meet you to then discuss about your new book.
Well, thank you for coming. It's great.
So, it's called Beyond Sex and Soup. How did you come up with this title?
I was a bit embarrassed about the title actually, but what I wanted to do was I just wanted to you know, these are fundamental human necessities,
Yes.
sex and soup, but actually they're not enough for us because we're very complicated beings, and we take those as a given and then we start to explore. And the point of my book really was the way in which your problems, whether they're emotional or physical, are actually showing you the way. They're showing you a path that is unique to you, for you to explore.
Yeah.
And so it's, yes, let's have sex and soup. They are a given. We need them. But also let's go beyond that. And that path is your own personal spiritual adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's great, and it's a fantastic title. It really sort of whets the appetite already, I think, for people, doesn't it? So you said in the past that your body is your teacher, and that you often talk about the language of the body. So can you just explain a little bit to us what does that mean?
So your body is your unconscious and your conscious mind, and obviously to function in the world we use our conscious mind, and we use our external senses, and we take the rest that governs the actual physical body for granted. So for example, if you had to figure out, you know, how many hormones and how many nervous impulses you need to coordinate in order to go upstairs,
Yes.
you just never get there.
No.
So the whole functioning of our body we take for granted, but it is actually so well attuned to the point of us, to the bigger, everything that is non-physical in you. So everything that is non-physical in you is essentially who you are.
Yeah.
Because you are your thoughts, you are your memories, you are your feelings, you are your experiences and your interpretation of those experiences, and you don't remember any of that, or rather, no, I should say, nobody sees that that is who you are.
Yeah.
We tend to think of ourselves as what we appear to be externally, and other people tend to think of that also. But in fact, we know that we are, the bit that really matters is the non-visible bit.
Yeah.
So the thing is that all of that is recorded in your body. Your body, some part of your body is registering every emotion. And you know that when you have a really sudden emotion like fear or panic, it will register in a part of your body. But what is not so well known is that your body also then records previous experiences and doesn't let them go until, and this is what I explain in my book, until your conscious mind actually goes and, if you like, relieves the body of that burden. Your conscious mind can go and visit a part of your body, discover through your imagination, which is incredibly vocal. It's an incredibly powerful communicator of the past, and your conscious mind can go to this part of your body, discover what's there, and decide to let it go. So it's like your conscious mind is the boss, but the real machine is the unconscious, which your body is, I would actually say, a part of. It's not the whole, it's a part of.
So this is when an illness can come up, or when something can happen to the body. You're saying that then you can go in and then work with that part of the body to find out what is the trauma, what is the memory.
Yes. So I use a map, and it's a map of the invisible, and it was arrived at through intuition, not by measurement. And that's the map of the chakras, and it's very well known. But there are other maps. There's plenty of maps of the invisible. There's the I also use the Hawaiian map, which divides the body into father, mother, and child, which is very, very eloquent. And if you lay the map of the chakras over an actual physical map of the nerves, of the nervous system, you'll see that the nexus, the wheels of nerves come out and they go into particular organs in your body. And each organ has a physical function, but it also has an emotional memory. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so you can use your access to the unconscious, which comes through meditation or through imagination, if you like, or just through feeling, to discover something about what that organ is telling you. It speaks in non-verbal language, but you perceive non-verbal effects.
Yeah. And do you always, so with the book, you're teaching people with the tools that they can use themselves, is that?
This book, I'm teaching people how to deal with their emotions more than with physical things, because we've all got emotions and they come first.
Yes.
And I mean, an emotion will create a tension, and that tension will lodge in your body, in your unconscious memory, if you like, and may emerge later as a physical illness, because your body is incredibly resilient and incredibly good at self-reconstruction, if you like, even when there is pain, even when there is difficulty. And it will go on wanting to recreate itself or wanting to return to normal, unless there is a persistent tension, which I would say is an emotional tension, that is not recognized and needs to be dealt with. So that's the physical source of, that's the non-physical source of physical problems. But before we get there, there has to be the things that we all experience all the time, like anger, jealousy, desire, unfulfilled desire, and all of those passions. And we have tended to think of those as caused by something outside us.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying in the book is, it is a co-creation. It is your reaction to the external circumstance, but the external circumstance is also invited in by you.
Yeah.
And it's invited in by what you are already carrying. So if you can use the external circumstance to see what you're carrying, to recognize what you're carrying, and allow it to leave, you don't actually have power over the other person or the other thing or the event, because that's only part of the picture that's affecting you. But you have huge power over yourself.
And it kind of gives you a little bit of freedom then when you're
Absolutely, because if you change that event in yourself, if you change that reaction in yourself and decide to let it go, you change your co-creation, you change what you're attracting.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you continue to attract the same thing over and over again. And you get to the point which I have got to many times where you go, why does this always happen to me?
Yes.
And the answer is because of you.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about how you can actually use your problems to free yourself, to create a great pathway.
So, but with that, isn't there a danger that people might feel blamed for their problems? So if you say that they're all connected to their feelings, will then people think, you know, oh, well, it's all my fault then?
I do think that some people feel blamed, and I understand why they feel that. But actually, growth is all about taking responsibility, because that's where your power lies. You don't have to have power. You're given your life, and you can start and just react to circumstances, and one day your life will end. And perhaps that's how you prefer to live. It wasn't for me, and I think the biggest difficulty is when you have a small child who suffers from some physical disease.
Absolutely, yes.
And you can't expect the child to take on responsibility in that way. And then I think it is difficult, because it connects, in my opinion, and my opinion comes from my experience of healing people, actually, not from anything else.
Yeah.
It just comes from what I see when I'm healing. It connects to whatever that child may or may not have been into in a previous existence, because I believe that consciousness is, because it's non-physical, is actually continuous. That doesn't mean that you have the same consciousness as the person who came before you, because when something ceases to be physical, it goes into a void and may then reconstruct as physical energy, but it wouldn't necessarily carry the same characteristics as before, but it might carry some of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think that when you have small children who suffer, there is a relationship between those children and their parents, which needs to be taken into account and might alleviate the situation. But it's not a question of blame, it's a question of taking an opportunity to deal with something.
And there's also a certain amount of curiosity, I think, as well. When you're talking about it, it just is curious as to, well, what is my body trying to tell me? What is the message? What is in this?
Well, I think the most exciting thing about this kind of work is that you know, we tend to think of ourselves as having only 5 senses, and in fact all of those senses are there to keep us safe. And what I'm trying to explain in the book is that we all also have inner senses, and a lot of the time we know this, and a lot of the time we forget it. And the more you focus on your inner senses, the more powerful they become and the more useful they become. Your external senses are there to keep your physical body safe.
Absolutely.
And your internal senses are there to conduct you on your journey. And they are really, really powerful. Now, of course, you still need your external senses, because you still need your physical body, you still need the sex and the suit. But it's like you cultivate a kind of double vision.
Yeah.
So you use one when you need to and the other when you need to. So it's like a knife edge between the two. It's a paradox because they don't meet, they're not interchangeable.
Yeah. Which is something, when you was actually just talking about the double vision, you mentioned that you interviewed the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
And said that now you get what he was saying those 20 years ago,
yes,
to do with the double vision and the paradox.
Absolutely. And the huge irony for me, so I was, at the time I had no idea. I wanted to do this very much, but I had no idea how lucky I was. But I was sat in a little room with the Dalai Lama and about 25 monks and whirring fans, and me and two other women. One was from Radio Leh, which was the local radio station in Ladakh, and the other was from France Inter. And we literally knelt on the ground because there was nowhere to sit and the room was really, really crowded. And we just asked him questions. And I was working for the BBC and I asked him a political question for my editors. And I said, well, what makes you think that the Tibetans would want you back in Tibet if you were able to go? Cheeky.
Yes.
And he said, when you are young, you see with one eye and you hear with one ear. And he said, when you get older, you see with two eyes and you hear with both ears.
Yeah.
And as I said, I really didn't understand what he was talking about. And the huge irony is that when I had a brain tumour, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 years later, the first symptom of it was double vision. And that's how I felt there was a problem. Yeah. So this whole thing of exploring double vision was a physical reality for me. And effectively, that's what I've written about in this book. It's like, yes, it's all a paradox. It's very logical. It's like the way quantum mechanics meets physical mechanics. They don't actually mesh. Each one is entirely logical in its own way. And you, a human being, is a living example of how these two work together.
Yeah.
So that's what the book's about.
Yeah. No, fantastic. And so you say that the emotional problems can be a pathway to an individual's happiness and fulfillment. So, but how does that work?
Well, I think we all have tendencies, and an astrologer, a really good astrologer, would say, oh yeah, I could pick those up in your chart. But you don't want to stay there. You don't want to stay with your tendencies. You want to, if you can, evolve. I really like the phrase that Ram Dass, the American yogi, came up with when he described life as the curriculum.
Yes.
And if you don't do the curriculum, then you have to keep repeating it. Yeah. So if you can spot your challenge and deal with it, then that is a massive evolution. It's a massive route on the path for you. So emotions, like physical symptoms, they have locations in the body. And they're fairly obvious. And I in the book, I go through, in Beyond Sex and Soup, I kind of go through the energy vibrations of different chakras. And so anxiety is related to your experience of security, and that is primarily related to your relationship with mother and whatever she was going through, for example.
Okay.
So if anxiety is a perpetual issue, that's where you need to go to recalibrate your reactions and let go your emotional reactions to experiences you may have had. Because what you find is that when you have siblings who grow up in exactly the same circumstances, they don't have the same emotional or physical problems. Each person comes in with, if you like, a recipe that comes from the previous consciousness, and they will react differently. So, for me, I going to the other end of the experience, I reacted in a way that I could never logically have explained to never having lived with my father. But my brothers, who also lost living with my father when they were young, they didn't react that way.
Mm.
So it's a combination of your personal spiritual pathway and and your current emotional experience.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we are all individuals, even
Yeah.
if, you know, brought up in the same family, all the rest
Yeah.
of it. It's fascinating. And one thing that I'm looking forward to in your book is that there is a secret in there from your grandfather, which you won't share, and you have to read it in the book. But just tell us a little bit about, obviously not the secret, but...
Well, it's just really, and you'll have to read the book to see what that secret comes to, but it seems to me that I just found these pieces of paper wrapped up in an old book that had belonged to my grandfather, that was about yoga, and it was published in the 1930s. And when I read it, I thought, you know, I have to put this in a book, because what was considered secret is not secret anymore.
Mm.
And we are living in an age of massive exploration and massive expansion. But there are parts of our humanity that we risk losing if we don't remember that we are just physical human beings. We need what our ancestors needed. We need fresh air, we need physical contact with nature, we need physical contact with each other.
Yeah.
And if we don't remember that we're human beings, or we're animals who need sex and soup, we lose so much of our strength. But at the same time, we're in this wonderful age of possibility, and what was secret is, because it would have been misinterpreted perhaps by the uneducated masses, is now available to all of us, because we are all the educated masses.
So I'm looking forward to finding out what the secret is. So is there anything else that you would like to share about the book for people before we go, that you feel would be good to share?
I should warn you that it is about life, it is about living. There's an awful lot of the experience of looking after my mother while she was dying in it. One of the things that our ancestors experienced more than we did is the presence of death as a consistent reality in their lives. We have experienced it as a global humanity in the last couple of years, and but we're not used to doing that.
Yeah.
We're used to putting it somewhere else, and actually the presence of death makes you so much more appreciative of the opportunity and the energy and the life that you have. And so I don't apologize for putting my mother in it. She was a great character, and it just so happened that I was writing the book while she began to die. And she died at the ripe old age of 94 and 95, and had a fantastic life. And that informed me, because you don't ever stop learning.
No. And it's beautiful that your books have totally come from your very own experience of the personal journey of the brain tumour, and then the healing experiences with other people. It's lovely.
Well, that's, yeah, for me, that's what cements your learning, your own personal experience. And they say, there's an old saying, a yogi saying, I believe, which is to learn, read, to know, write, to master, teach. Well, I've started to teach.
Yeah, you have. Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Thank you.
So yes, thank you. And where can people get your book?
You can get it. So here it is, Beyond Sex and Soup. It's out now. You can get it at any good bookshop, Waterstones, Barnes and Nobles, any bookshop near you, or you can get it on Amazon. If you do get it on Amazon, please leave a review, because that's why we buy things.
Yes,
All right.
totally. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. It's so much easier watching a film. So I'm going to, I don't know, I think there's a question here. Let me see, I'm going to spend a little minute looking at these questions. That's all about you. Did most people hear? You can, oh yeah, that was a suggestion to somebody to log out and log in again. Yeah, this is a question about being wary of the idea that physical diseases are emanations of unresolved emotional traumas, and the idea that the remedy is actually within our grasp. So the question is, if only we could engage our imagination in the right way, there is an element of this. Will I find how to resolve trauma in your book? Well, yes, I believe so. I think the thing is that what I'm trying to say is that your trauma is very peculiar to you. What we tend to do, let's go back to this idea of external senses and internal senses. We tend to use the external senses are geared towards growth, towards carrying on, towards external movement, of course. And so when we have illness or difficulty or trauma, emotional trauma, we tend to avoid it by just carrying on with our lives, escaping. And that's very reasonable and very sensible. But there comes a point if the signs point to the trauma having caused a physical disease or having caused a difficulty, there comes a point where you have to not escape the trauma, but go back and look into it. And actually, whatever you do, if you're using these very simple invisible tools, whatever you do, you're looking at it from a safe perspective, because you are not the person that experienced that trauma anymore. You have survived it. But there is a part of you that is still carrying the effect that it had on you, physically and emotionally. The one person who is super powerful in terms of releasing you from the effect of that trauma is you, is your current adult self. Because, and this is where the Hawaiian definition of dividing the body into the child, the mother, and the father is really helpful. It's not really the body that they divide, or it is the body, but it is really the consciousness, the living consciousness that they divide. Because in your living consciousness, you are able to look at what the child or your younger self has suffered and feel the suffering, but at the same time, not be overwhelmed by it as you were. And because you're not overwhelmed, you can release yourself from it. And how you do that exactly is, yes, the point, the purpose of writing the book for me. I wanted to hand over some invisible tools that anybody can use. So has anybody else got a question? If you like, I will unmute you so that you can verbalize a question. How do I unmute everybody? Just go down okay. So I'm allowing you to all unmute yourselves if you want to. Yeah, Yeah.
Can I just ask, Anna, one of the things that you talk about is the power of our imagination. You know, you said that you talk about that. Could you just talk a little bit more about our imagination, how powerful it can be?
I think that culturally we've tended to distrust our imagination. And it's interesting that when I'm teaching people to heal, and this is a very key thing, they will often be sort of stuck with what they see, a non-physical thing, but something that they perceive, because they will be telling themselves, this is only my imagination. But the reason that healing is such a teaching medium is because if you tell your imagination to the person you're working with, and that has a reality for that person, then you begin to see that your imagination is not fantasy, it's an energetic language. And that means that every person that you're working with as a healer is teaching you, because they're allowing you to use this imagination as a tool. So what that's shown me, it was a tool for me too. I mean, that is the principal tool that I used to tell the tumor in my head that I didn't want it to be there, and see it leaving. I can't say it vanishes overnight like a soap bubble. I wish it did, but it was quite a lot of applied and continuous work. But there are so many examples, even, for example, like, you know, the famous placebo effect. They say that this was developed during the war when someone was trying to apply morphine to damaged servicemen and women, and he ran out of painkiller, and so he just used salted water. And it had just as much effect, if not more, than the morphine. So in terms of relieving pain. So that's how the placebo effect was discovered, and it still works, and it continues to work. But you don't, you know, you don't actually need to believe in it. Well, in the case of the placebo, you do believe in it before it begins. But more of it, in the kind of work I do, it's more about trusting yourself. And then, okay, so let's say you imagine something. You're not going to go to court and say, I imagine this, therefore it's true. And in the book, I talk a lot about how we all have different realities. And my reality might be different from your reality because I'm going to see it in a different way. But for me, my reality is important. And so I need to trust what I do see, what I do. And if that can be used as a tool for me, then it's fine, it works. Any other questions or thoughts? It's such a shame because at this point we will be breaking out the champagne.
I have a question, Anna. Yeah, so is the book meant to stand on its own as a self-help guide, or do you see it as something to go alongside working with a healer like yourself?
No, that's a really good question. Actually, it's meant to stand on its own, because although I love working as a healer, the whole aim that what I try to do is to give people the tools to stand on their own feet. I don't want people to feel that they need to be healed by somebody external. I would much rather that they use healing as like an energy boost or an insight period or an extra help. And then what I'm describing in the book are tools that you develop and use for yourself, and then you become your own teacher, really. And I have to say, the way I write that may be a motivation to write this. In fact, this is the story. I thought, I'm going to write these tools down. I teach them to people. I've used them. I teach them in workshops. I'm going to write them down. So I'm writing this book. I think it's really simple. It's going to be finished in 5 minutes. And then I think, oh, hang on, I think I'm kind of trying to describe the universe here. This is really quite complicated. And anyway, I like to tell stories because it's really boring just to read exercises. And then in the middle of all this, then my poor mum starts to die. So in fact, there's a lot in the book, which is story, but at its core, there is this thread of quite clear exercises that apply to different emotional states. All the ones that I could think of.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Jodie, did you want to ask something, or are you just saying hi?
Well, both. Hi. And I also had a question. That was really.
Oh, I lost you for a second, so we'll wait for you to come back in.
I'm asking my question.
No, I lost your question. I have to try again.
Sure. So when you referred to being the adult self and being able to experience what would have been overwhelming when you were experiencing it as a child, perhaps, I'm curious, just as you've worked with people, if you have seen any ways in which people can build up that sort of tolerance for not being overwhelmed, just sort of what you've observed about people's readiness to not be overwhelmed, and any ways that you've seen help them do that. Sorry, I just ran up some stairs, so I feel like I was gasping there. But
Okay. Flattered that you ran upstairs to get here. Yes, so when you touch a feeling in a memory, which may not appear in your conscious memory, but may well appear when you imagine that you are back in a situation that touched you. When you touch a feeling, immediately that feeling comes out almost like it's been in a freezer or a can. You feel the intensity of it as though you were still that person feeling that feeling. And it doesn't really, most of these things occur in childhood, but of course it doesn't end in childhood, because what I'm trying to explain is that, you know, there are vibrations that set up a recurrence of this in your life. But let's say that you take this back to your childhood and you feel something that was really intensely difficult for you as a child. The way to deal with it, whether you felt that when you were 45 or 5, the way to deal with it is to look at the part of you that is having this intense feeling like it is a child, like it is in fact your child. To look upon it with the same love and compassion that you would look upon your own child who was having that difficulty. Because we just are not accustomed to, I mean, compassion is the way through. It's the way through to peace, to be honest. And we're not accustomed to giving ourselves that degree of compassion that we need, that our own weaknesses need. Any feeling that has been salted away or locked in a box is a feeling of intense vulnerability, or you wouldn't have locked it away. And you need to let yourself feel it with the compassion that a mother would allow her child to feel. And then when you've done that, you can do something sensible with the feeling, like decide that you would like to let go of it, and imagine yourself letting go of it as some kind of physical object, like taking off a jacket or throwing it away in a pool or something like that. And once you've done that, you just notice that you do feel physically different. You feel physically as though you have taken that jacket off or dropped something that has been weighing on you. And so you become the reinforcer of your own skill, if you like. Does that answer your question, Jodie?
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. Ava.
Yes, hello. That's
Hi.
me. Yes, I have to say everything what I've written, sorry, what you've written, I read is absolutely fascinating. And,
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
you know, I recommended your books to so many people because I just thought it was eureka for me. Okay, so that's why I'm here listening about a new book. But also would like to hear from you what you think about, because yes, I absolutely believe that lots of problems, most problems come from the childhood and not dealing with it. But if you feel you've dealt with it, but there are new diseases or new problems, does it mean you haven't really dealt with it, or there are some new patterns developing in your life which don't are not for your best, you know, good?
Well, as everybody's individual, I wouldn't give a blanket answer to that, but this is what I would suspect. I would suspect that perhaps you've dealt with it in certain circumstances, but then perhaps the addition of another person or somebody else's reaction sets off a sort of separate chapter which you haven't quite dealt with. In other words, how do you react? It's fine so long as you're on one is on one's island and nobody's going to bother you. But then how do you react when people behave as people do? Do you see what I mean? So it may be, and this is why it becomes actually a really valuable way of dealing with anger, say, you know, I mean, I would probably be somebody who would have sudden explosive anger. And I'm not saying that I then know how not to be angry ever, but I have learned how to take my anger and look at it and go afterwards, okay, why? What was all that about? And then begin to see that this person is actually reflecting something in me that I don't want to know about or I don't want to see, but actually they've done me a favor because they're showing me something like a mirror shows you the shape of your body. So that's an example of how difficult stuff, with anger, it's very, very easy to say it's the other person's fault. You know, if they didn't behave like this, then I wouldn't behave like this. But that actually doesn't resolve anything. It doesn't get you through a situation. You have to just say, okay, they behave like they do, and I have to take this anger and see what is it in me? Why does that behavior touch this off in me? Because I can let my bit go, but I can't change them. So that's an example. So it may be, I mean, I know that Raju Jimmy, the Tibetan teacher who is a friend, says, well, you know, monks and nuns, they go to monasteries and convents because it's just easier. Other people don't get in the way, you know, but life is not like that. You can't cut yourself off, and it's other people who might be, you know, who might be actually waking something up that you haven't wanted to see. That answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
And someone, is there a way you can protect SJ?
Yeah.
Small children from future trauma, or are they destined to go through this? Oh, okay, sorry. I've got a very good, SJ, what's your question?
Oh, I'm there. Am I here?
Oh, yeah. What's your question?
Hello. My question was, is there a little exercise for each morning, perhaps in your book or during the day, that can help you just become more aware of these pesky emotions that we need to sort of catch and be aware of before they settle and become a problem?
Yeah, there is, and it's dead simple. Everybody needs personal space. I mean, if you don't have space, then you're never going to use your internal senses, because you're just not going to have, you're not going to be able to hear them or feel them or see them. That means that whatever your circumstances, you need to use your elbows enough to insist on having maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, which is just yours. And if you don't, you get squeezed, you feel completely, that's how it was for me. I just got to a point where I felt like a kind of a rusty train. And some instinct told me that I just needed space. And all I did in that space, and I don't know whether Clara remembers, because you were quite small when this started, all I did was, put the kids' breakfast on the table and tell them that I was going to have 5 minutes peace. And I literally, it was very, very hard, but I just sat down with a clock beside me and I said, I'm going to breathe for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. I can't even remember how long it was. And, after 2 minutes, I'd be looking at the clock thinking, I must get up, because I could hear my engine, if you like, my normal functioning engine sort of galvanizing me on. But even if you just take those 10, if you push that to one side and you just take those 10 minutes of space to breathe, I could say 10 minutes of space to listen to nothing, but that's not the point, really. Just breathing will get you into a zone where you can process everything that happens to you. And it only takes a few minutes, actually. It doesn't take long for you to understand something that you wouldn't understand if you just keep on carrying on. Does that answer your question?
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And then Sarah asked, where and how are you teaching? Where and how am I teaching? I started to do, I did this last year, an apprenticeship where I teach Lomi Lomi and healing for 7 weekends through the year, so 1 weekend a month for 7 months. And I'm doing that again this year in London, starting in April, I believe, or May, I'm not quite sure, but I can send you details if you email me. And I'm also doing an online healing course, which Jodie was on last year, weren't you, Jodie? I'm doing that again this year, and that is, again, it's 1 session a month, and I'm talking about the principles of healing. Obviously I can't teach Lomi Lomi online, but I'm talking about the principles of healing and how you can apply them, and people interchange and use that work on each other. So that's how I'm teaching. And anybody who's interested in knowing more about the teaching, just send an email to anna@annaparkinson.com and I will send you an outline of what's going on. I'm also going to do a breath workshop, a 1-day breath workshop at the end of March in London, which I have been longing to do again, actually, because one of the things about this breath workshop is that I show you the Hawaiian Ha breath, which is very simple, but very visionary. All breathing can be used in different ways to achieve different effects. But the Ha breath is, I think, beautiful, powerful. And of course, I haven't really been able to do it because the one thing we're not allowed to do in pandemic is breathe in public. So I'm hoping that I can go ahead, and I'm planning to do that at the end of March. So Serena says onion layers, which I think is a very interesting comment, because it occurred to me the other day that when you're painting, one of the things that painting teaches you is that many layers make black dark, which is actually different from reality, because in reality, darkness comes from the absence of light. It's just being withdrawn. But if you want to convey darkness in a picture, you add layers of color. Okay, you can just get a black paint and just cover it over, but layers of color make things darker and darker and darker and darker. And it seems to me that that is much more like what our lives are like, that as we grow, we acquire layers of defenses, of hurt, of disappointments, and we need to peel them away, as you say, Serena, and as the donkey says in Shrek, like layers of an onion, because as you peel them away, you find your child again, and that's fun. And there's another question here from Clara, which is there a way that you can protect small children from future trauma, or are they destined to go through their pain? I think every person feels pain, I'm afraid. And I think that we cannot avoid it. And so you can protect them because you can let them know that your love is a constant no matter what. And I believe that when they have very, very strong belief and experience of love, they will feel that love even should you die, because love is one of those non-physical connections in consciousness which is unbroken, and you feel your connection with that person however far away they are in physicality. That's my answer. Oh, Jody says I was on the online course and it was wonderful, highly recommend. Thank you, Jody. Kerry says yes, very good. And Sarah says, oh, I'd love to do that breathing workshop with London friends. What's the date? I think it's the 26th, Sarah. I will send you more information. And Debbie says, thanks very much. I have to go now. And she's just bought my book and she's super excited. And Serena makes a very good point, which I think is related to children, which is that you can give them tools. You are so right, Serena. I have to say that it is not easy to teach your own children. You don't necessarily want to know. It's much easier for them to learn from what and when they want to find out. Anyway, bless you all. It's been so great talking to you. Thank you so much for turning up. I'm going to post that little film on my website so that, you know, anybody can find out what it's about. It's just great to have the United Nations here, and I'm really pleased that you've been able to spare the time. Thank you. And special thanks also to Jackie, who did the interview for me, which she did very well. That's love. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anna.
Lovely to
Bye,
see you all.
thank you, Anna.
Oh, bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Oh, and me.
I've already started. It's great.
Well, oh, thank you, Maureen. That's fantastic. I'm thrilled. If
Yeah.
anybody wants a signed copy, you can get one from me, but I will have to charge you postage.
I'll get mine signed later.
Yeah, you get yours signed later. All
Yep,
right. Then.
thank
okay,
you.
Great. Okay.
Well, hopefully I can get it when I see you soon.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye bye, Anna.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Bye.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.